Thank you, Tim.
Are we ready?
Looks like Councilor Gonzalez is still connecting.
Oh, okay.
There it is. I think he's up now.
All right, I'll go ahead and call this to order.
they
This
checking
meeting. Welcome, Councilor Gonzalez. I'm going to call to order this meeting of the City of Salem City Manager Performance Evaluation Committee. Present are Hoy
Stapleton, Nordyke.
Gonzalez.
and Councilor Gonzalez also online. Thank you. And I will turn it over at this time to Michelle. Are you leading us off?
I will, yes, thank you.
Great.
I hope everybody got a copy of the agenda. I'm just gonna kind of stick to the agenda. The next item on our agenda was the approval of the minutes. I did send that out to y'all. Was there any changes or edits or items for discussion with the previous minutes from August 30th?
No, would you like me to move approval of the minutes, Chris?
Yes, please.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries.
I think we have to ask if there's any public comment next.
Do we have any members of the public present in the room or online?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I don't actually have a copy of the, oh, here's, sorry, now I have it in front of me. All right, so now we are a discussion item, Council Policy A6, the procedure for reviewing performance and setting salary for the city manager. Michelle, back to you.
Thank you. So the council policy is very succinct and descriptive into how the performance appraisal process should be for the city manager. Our proposal today from Daniel Keene, it does not align directly with the council policy as written. Oh, perfect. Danny's here.
Thank you.
So, so that's what we wanted to discuss today. If you had any questions about the proposal, about Dan's process, and then we have some staff recommendations with regard to maybe a one-time waiver right now of the council policy for the appraisal and potential move forward options for this process.
Just for clarity's sake, how does it not align with council policy or direction?
So the proposal, and Dan can speak to it a little bit more, the proposal is for a facilitated evaluation process. So the policy specifically requires a matrix be used. And it is actually attached to the policy, and this matrix is sent out and filled out. Dan's proposal is a facilitated process, which is an interview. It's an interactive process with each council member and the mayor versus filling out this form where you rank things. So, so Dan, welcome to our meeting.
Thank you very much. Good to meet you all. Good to be here this afternoon.
Would you please give us just a brief overview of your process? And then we can have conversation after that, or any questions can be asked and answered after that.
Sure. Yeah, and I came in on the middle of that conversation you were having, but you characterized it correctly. So this is a process that would be strictly interview based, and that's a different approach for some agencies. In fact, traditionally, the methods that most cities have used for evaluations has been some kind of a form that's filled out by each council member, and then the results are assembled in some way. There are other models, but in recent years, that particular method has become less popular, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Forms, by their nature, tend to be kind of constricting. They are going to have certain categories of questions. Typically, they're going to have some form of rating. and they purport to represent the whole picture of the manager's performance. But as we know, the manager's performance can be very, very multidimensional. There can be a lot of things that a council may consider important this year that may not be so important next year. And a forum is sort of a rigid way of looking at the performance that really doesn't allow a lot of room for going beyond that if those subject matter areas are important. The other thing is it can be very variable among council members, and I'm not talking about Salem particularly, but in my experience as a manager, a former manager myself who experienced kind of the form-based approach, sometimes you will have council members who will be very diligent about completing that form and will really put the time and effort in to write out, some of their comments to explain their ratings. Others may not spend much time on it at all. So what you end up with is a bunch of different points of view, maybe 5 or 7 or 9, that you're then trying to represent to the manager as a measure or a representation of their performance. And that can be very inconsistent, let's just say. An interviews-based process sort of does away with some of the difficulties of that process because we conduct an interview one-on-one with each council member, and it is an interview that is conducted with open-ended questions. So it allows room for follow-up and for additional discussion if a particular issue is very important to that council member. The results of that interview are recorded. Not taped recorded, but typed. I keep track. I take good notes. Let's just put it that way. And those results are maintained confidential and anonymous with respect to how it's reported to the council and to the city manager. So what we end up with after a series of interviews of each member of the council is a report that summarizes the major themes that came out of those interview questions, also captures some of the, not majority points of view, if there are some, and then paints a big picture of the manager's performance that is then presented in your executive session with the manager present and, of course, all of the council participating. And then we have a discussion about that feedback. My role is the interview process. I have a lot of experience doing this kind of work. I've done more than 40 of these processes since retiring in 2017. Prior to retirement, I was a city manager for about 22 years in California in 5 different places. I experienced this process, so I learned about this process and the value of it as a manager. I had also experienced some of the awful processes, frankly, that are out there. And really recognized in retirement, this is something I wanted to do because I see it as advancing the partnerships that have to exist between a city manager and their city council to really be successful. And if the manager doesn't get a good picture of their performance, if there's something about the process that doesn't allow a point of view or a concern to get expressed, it doesn't mean that express went away, that concern went away. It just means it's still out there potentially festering, potentially causing problems in the working relationship that then later come out as a bigger problem that could have been addressed much sooner. Because I have worked as a manager, I know how the manager, I know what the manager is facing in terms of their day-to-day work. I understand their role, but I've also worked with many, many elected officials over the course of my career. So I have experience in working with elected officials, talking with them, capturing what they want to say, and then reporting it in a way that is constructive and useful for the city council and the city manager, and puts things into a form that becomes a record so that each year there's a record of what was shared with me, the consultant, what was reported to the manager, and what goals that they face for the coming year. So that's in a nutshell, that is the process that I facilitate.
Thank you for that overview. I think that's really helpful. Just personally having conducted many performance evaluations over the course of my career, both with the form kind of system and then more with an open-ended, just kind of general questions. I find the type of evaluation that you have outlined to be much richer and much more meaningful, both for the person doing the evaluation and also having been evaluated in both of those ways. It's much more valuable for the person receiving that evaluation as well. And I think it's also just because we are, all volunteer elected officials, the amount of time that it would take for each one of those individuals would be much better spent in a conversation with you rather than trying to fill out a form that might be quite tedious and more of a chore rather than a meaningful opportunity to provide feedback. That's my perception on the whole thing. Counselor Stapleton.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. When I read the packet for today's meeting and I read your resume and the fact that you used to be a city manager and in those 5 different cities, and taking from that experience, this kind of into this work that you're doing now, I think is really, really valuable. For me, the forms are very tedious and I don't really get into them. I don't, express myself as much. Because a lot of it is like, oh, well, I talk to that person all the time. Of course, they know that I think they're doing a good job. Or, I had that, conversation with them about a lack that we're having or maybe, whatever it is, the issue that we're working on. So I tend to hold back on the forms because it is tedious. And so I know that I would benefit from having a conversation with you about this instead of the form. But those are just my thoughts.
Counselor Nordyke or Counselor Gonzalez, do you have input?
Ditto.
Ditto. All right.
Ditto.
I agree. I do have a question for Dan. All of these notes and such that Mr. Sheets be collecting, is that exempt from public records requests as a employee evaluation?
As a good lawyer answer, yes, but items or information given in confidence can remain confidential under Oregon Public Records Law. It's a conditional exemption based on public interest. I think we have an overriding public interest in keeping your frank and candid comments regarding the city manager's performance confidential. I think that would outweigh the public's interest in knowing a particular counselor's, actual verbatim comments. So I think we have be very successful in keeping those comments confidential. I think Mr. Keene will, provide a note in writing when he's given that to you that these are submitted in confidence with the expectation of confidentiality.
Great. Okay. I'm supportive.
Thank you, Counselor. So it sounds like Dan or Michelle, I'm not sure who would be the best to direct this to, but it sounds like we have consensus on our direction. So what we need guidance on how to get us to that point.
So, excuse me, so we will prepare a staff report. The things that we need to do to move forward with this process is to make a recommendation that we waive for this particular evaluation period some of the items in the policy for the city manager evaluation. So we're preparing that. So we'll provide that to city council via staff report for approval. And then we can move forward with getting some dates on the calendar with Dan. Is that correct, Dan?
Yes, that's correct. And I think once this particular evaluation process is over, we might ask for a follow-up meeting of this committee to rework the policy so it's more guideline based and less prescriptive, so we don't have to go through the step next time.
That's what I was thinking, Dan. I would like to do this process with an eye toward potential rule modification in the future. Like what would that process look like? So if staff, if you could help us, kind of keep that long, so we have a consistent process documented in our rules, so we don't have to do some sort of waiver in the future, and so we maintain some consistency. I think that would be great.
We will do that for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
What else do we need to discuss on this?
Nothing from me.
Michelle, do we have anything else we need to go over?
Nope.
Or is that it?
That's it for now. We'll present the staff report as soon as the staff report is approved at the council. Then I know Dan's already been in contact with our procurement office. So
Right.
we'll be ready to get some dates on the calendar for Dan to start. And as you read in the scope of work here, he'll start with self-assessment for Keith, and then do interviews after that. So we'll get some dates to you once we have a firm move forward.
Great.
And that is officially the shortest meeting that we have had.
Wow.
Congratulations. I'm thrilled to hear that. The performance evaluation won't be quite that short.
Yeah.
So Michelle, I'm just looking at our agenda items. I want to make sure, do we need to discuss any of these other discussion items at this time, or will that be for later?
No, we actually discussed everything on the discussion items. So the staff recommendations is to go with the facilitated interview, which is the waiver of some of those points. So we've hit everything on there. I try to be efficient.
Good.
Fantastic. Good work, everybody. Thank you all. And thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you,
Look
guys.
forward to working with you.
And we
Thank you
look
very
forward to
much.
working with you, Dan.
Yeah, I look forward to it as well.
And I
Alright.
It's
just
fun
want to
to come
thank
up to
everybody
Salem.
for their patience in this process. I mean, it took us a little bit, but we're at the right place and we're making good changes. So thank you guys for your patience.
I think we're on the right track, so I'm happy. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Great.
We are adjourned.